Hello, everyone. This is the Unheard Voices podcast. My name is Evan Korean.
And my name is Anshuman Parikh. For the past few years, we have seen massive numbers of refugees and asylum seekers leave their homelands due to various dangers and seek safety in the United States. We mostly hear about them from the lens of the media or politicians. But here, we want to hear from the asylum seekers themselves.
Welcome to the first episode in our podcast series where we tell the unheard stories of asylum seekers. These asylum seekers were bused up to New York City from the southern border, and some of them were sent to our town. When they arrived, most of our community did their part to welcome them by providing food, clothing, and hosting picnics. And a local synagogue organized a Thanksgiving dinner for them. However, a small minority of people were very opposed and took to social media to complain. We felt that it was very unfair and wanted to provide a platform for them to share their experiences and perspectives. We were able to work with the village and a local church to set up interviews. We hope you enjoy the first episode.
Just a quick heads up, we did have to record this interview while JH and MA were with their children, so if you hear any screaming babies in the background, we're sorry for that. Today we'll be interviewing a couple of asylum seekers from Venezuela. Their names are JH and MA. We changed these names to ensure their privacy.
42 años y igual es asistente de farmacia.
JH is 23 years old and was a pharmacy assistant in Venezuela. She loves music. One of her favorite artists is Adele.
Sí, mi ocupación era asistente de ventas para una fábrica de etiquetas autoadhesivas. Ahorita nuestro hobby acá es las clases de inglés.
Emma is 42 and was the manager at a sticker factory. She joked now that her hobby was attending the English classes because it gives her family a way to socialize and hang out with others. Now that they've told us a little bit about themselves, let's hear from them why they would choose to leave their home country and come to the United States.
Bueno, la situación económica y política que hay actualmente en el país. Bueno, no, bueno, para nadie es un secreto, ahorita el país está pasando por una crisis total, pues de todo prácticamente. Y principalmente la economía, con un bebé pequeño, es horrible porque el sueldo, lo que trabajas prácticamente son como $20 el mes completo y no te alcanza para la comida ni para mucho, pues, o sea, ahí hay que... Y ahí, por la parte política, o sea, tú no puedes manifestar si estás en contra del gobierno actual porque te persiguen, te amenazan, te meten hasta preso si tú expresas lo que tú, o sea, tu ideal, lo que tú quieres, pues lo que a ti te parece.
Here she says the political and economic state of Venezuela was completely unstable. Economically, the country was in a very difficult position. For her, a month's salary only meant $20 due to inflation. That couldn't cover medicine, food, or other basic necessities. In the political landscape, Venezuela was controlled by an autocratic regime. That meant many basic human rights were restricted. Speaking out against the government could mean arrest or even death. For JH and MA, living in constant fear was unbearable, so they decided to leave.
En lo personal, yo salí desde Venezuela, fui a Colombia. Bueno, yo 4 días, cruzamos ríos, montañas, barro, de todo, piedras, de todo. De Costa Rica fui a Nicaragua para cruzar, caminamos por las plantaciones de naranja. De ahí fuimos a Managua, y de Managua fuimos a la frontera con Honduras. De ahí fuimos de pueblos en pueblos como en vans, como en los... Ahí sí, el policía que te paraba te quitaba lo que cargabas. Para no devolverte te quitaban el dinero que llevabas. Ahí llegamos a la frontera con México. De ahí avancé a un pueblito, pero nos detuvo migración de México y nos devolvió otra vez a Guatemala. Y volvimos a cruzar en el bote. Allí me quedé 20 días esperando la cita de CDP-1, pero no me llegó nunca. Ahí ya no teníamos nada de dinero, entonces con otro grupo de venezolanos que habían, decidimos irnos en el tren para la frontera de México con Estados Unidos, a Piedras Negras, se llama el pueblo. Ahí cruzamos el río, nos recibió migración. Caminamos, bueno, tuvimos que bajar por el río como una hora caminando también. Hasta la parte donde estaba como, donde no había cerca, y por ahí te dejaban pasar.
Their journey from Venezuela was very difficult, to say the least. Most of their journey was on foot, walking through jungles, mountains, and countrysides. After fleeing Venezuela, they made their way to Colombia before making their way through the very treacherous Darien Gap to Panama. From Panama, they went to Costa Rica and then Nicaragua, Honduras, and Guatemala. In these countries, they traveled from town to town in vans. If the police caught them, they would take away all their money so that they were stranded and unable to progress forward or travel backwards. Eventually, they were able to make it across to Mexico, but they were caught again by authorities who deported them back to Guatemala, and they had to start the van hopping process all over again. Finally, they were able to get to Mexico City, where they waited for 20 days to receive legal papers that she had paid a lot of money for. These papers would have allowed her to have an easier time seeking asylum in the United States. However, these papers never came. Out of money, she banded together with other Venezuelans to get on a train to the U.S. border, where they would eventually be able to cross and seek asylum.
For most of their interview, JH and MA spent their time talking about their experiences in the Darien Gap. Here are some of their stories that they chose to share with us.
Una lancha, digamos, una lancha con 5 motores. Una lancha con 5 motores. Esto era para que la lancha fuera un poco más rápido de lo normal, un poco no, bastante rápido de lo normal. Y fue un susto bastante grande, porque pensamos en algún momento que la lancha se iba a voltear, ninguno tenía salvavidas, íbamos todos a oscuras porque si nos agarraban los de la
Migración.
migración de Panamá.
No, la guerrilla de ahí de Colombia.
No, y también la migración
Porque
de
si
Panamá.
te vas, tú sabes que vas de Necoclí a la selva.
Nosotros vamos a ir de hasta Carreto, ya no sé.
No, pero está un carreto.
Entonces sí, la migración de Panamá.
Here, they talked about their experiences with smugglers. They promised the group safe and quick passage through a treacherous lake. Without any other choice, the group hopped onto the rickety motorboat and rode with them. The smugglers had added 4 extra motors to compensate for all the people on the boat. Filled to the brim with people, the boat was a walking death trap. Even with all the risks incurred, it was still a longer and a more expensive trip.
En México, ya finalizando México, me dijeron prácticamente o me das dinero o me das a tu hija. Los de migración.
Following the theme of exploitation, here MA tells us about how an immigration officer demanded a very hefty bribe to allow them to proceed. When MA refused, the immigration officer threatened to take her baby as payment instead.
La mamá muere de hambre. Y el papá, en vez que sus hijos quedaron sin mamá, decide que mueren el padre y los hijos.
Se suicidaron.
O sea, se suicidaron. Se tiraron al río.
El papá suicidó a los hijos porque los niños son niños.
Sí, o sea, porque en ver que no es así, se ve como los propios hijos no pueden cargar con su propio papá.
In this clip, they talked about a Haitian family they had met within the Darien Gap. Unfortunately, the mother had passed away due to some complications along the voyage. As their journey continued, the weight of the tragedy continued to weigh on the family. It had become unbearable to the point where the father ended up committing suicide and took his children with him. Even MA said at one point she asked God to give her a heart attack if it meant she could escape the jungle. Being in the Darien Gap was a mental challenge just as much as it was a physical one.
Now that they're in the United States, JH and MA see a lot of differences from what they experienced at home to now what they experience now in the United States. This interview was recorded around Christmas time, so we talked a lot about their Christmas traditions.
Nos reunimos toda la familia, hacemos comida, música, celebraciones, los que beben alcohol toman alcohol, los niños juegan, hacemos postres, frutas, una celebración.
In this clip, JH and MA talk about how their Christmas in Venezuela was often a grand event with all their families and neighbors with lots of food and presents. One interesting cultural difference that they talked about was that they gave the children their presents on the 24th rather than the 25th, which I just thought was an interesting difference.
JH and MA both want to join the workforce as soon as possible, and they're learning English to try and help them out on that mission. JH wants to return to the medical field in some capacity, and MA wants to either become a social worker or own her own cleaning business.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Unheard Voices podcast. My name is Anshuman Parikh.
And my name is Evan Kurian.
Thank you for listening. Thank you to Sabina and Priscilla Gaston of St. Barnabas Church, who helped us schedule the interviews and translate for us. Thank you to Kenny Herzog and Mayor Nancy Kabulian for the help and support while working on this project. And thank you to the Ardsley Multicultural Committee.